Today I'm going to be putting this dress up kit on from Perrin because you can never get enough ink in my car, and I'm going to show you a couple different tricks on putting this on because I've watched a couple of the videos of other people putting them on and they had some issues. So we'll just, you know, look at a couple different tricks. Also, please don't wear like a big chunky belt or like jeans with rough edges and stuff when you're doing this, because you might have to lean on this. And I saw a guy like scratch out of his front because he had a big belt buckle. So yeah, first pointer, maybe wear like softer clothes. Yeah, so let's get into it. Alright, so I'm actually going to do a voiceover because you do not need to listen to my dogs barking like crazy. So right here, I'm using a 10mm to remove that bolt on the left side. Yes, I still have mine. I know it's a dreaded size. Hopefully you do have yours. I'm just going to spin that off. It was a little like grimy and slippery, so it takes me a second just to get it off here. Don't mind me talking kind of to myself at this point. But once that spins off, I'm just going to remove it. You do not need it again for anything in this project. And then that big black piece just slips right off, and you should be able to get it off pretty easily. It's not that hard. And then I'm just going to slide that rubber grommet out the side, like towards the left. I've seen some people cut it up. You don't need to. It should slide right out the left side. And we also need to move the wire right there. Just unplug it, wrap it around, and then plug it back in because the system's literally going to sit right on top of that. I had to use a flathead to kind of help push it off a little bit just because I don't have like 11 to 12 fingers, so I found it a little bit easier once you push in the tab just to kind of like guide it off. Using the flathead just kind of gives you a little extra strength. It should not be terribly difficult. And then I just wrapped it around the back of that metal mounting piece and plugged it right back in. Alright, and then we're also going to be using the sticky pad that they should have given you in the kit. It's pretty small, and we're going to put it right on top of that metal mounting piece that we now just cleared off. That's where the pulley cover is going to actually be sitting on top of. Alright, here's the other thing. We just put this on here, right? I have to put this kind of here. Now, I don't know about you, but I drop stuff all the time, which is why we're going to do a lot of editing in this. But that just seems really, like, unsecured. So what I'm actually going to do is, instead of placing it here and then trying to drop the bolts through that, because that's going to be on the cover, I'm actually going to slide this onto the bolts that are already on the cover. I'll show you in a second. So now that we have everything out of the way, I just removed the backing off of that little sticky pad there, and I'm actually going to drop the spacers directly onto the bolts that I've now put onto the cover. I'm going to match up the longer one to the longer bolt, and obviously the shorter one with the shorter. You're going to put the longer side on the alternator space, and then we're going to drop it right into that opening that we just removed the bolts from. I didn't totally realize that I leaned kind of into your way, so you couldn't actually see what I was doing, but I just screwed it in. It's kind of stuck to that sticky pad there. Not terribly tight, but it kind of helps just hold everything in place for the meantime. And now the other issue is, the bolt on the right side, that shorter one, doesn't actually slide into anything because we just removed that rubber grommet. There's no actual space to screw into, so we're going to have to use the tiny nut and washer that they give us to kind of create the backing. Issue is, obviously, I drop things pretty often, so we're going to have to figure out a crafty little way to get under there without necessarily dropping it as you're trying to line up the bolt. So what I saw somebody else do was they actually taped all of that together on a wrench, and I might try that in a second. He also super glued it, but that just seems like I'm likely to make mistakes, so we're just going to avoid that for today. I did actually tape it to a wrench, and it seems to work pretty well. It held everything in place and allowed me to just line it up nicely where my fingers were not necessarily going to be the greatest. And it's going to allow you to kind of get under there without your hands getting in the way or it slipping right through and dropping it, because this nut is so small, it is highly likely to happen, and I do not suggest trying to do this with your bare fingers. And hopefully be able to kind of wiggle this tape out. Which I might have actually like screwed in the tape, but it's fine. We'll figure it out together. Oh, yep. Alright, so I actually ended up reaching under there with this because I screwed in the piece of tape. So I had to just grab it and yank it out, but it came out no problem. So now that is done. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit because I am filthy and I'm leaving dirty little fingerprints all over it. Alright, so if there's some like easier difficulties. I don't know why they said it was a 10mm. I used an 8. Maybe I'm totally reading that wrong, but I ended up using my ratchet and an 8mm attachment. And then I just kind of cranked those down because these were actually in 2 pieces when they came. So yeah, now that this is together, I didn't do it that tight, but now that this is together, we can go take apart some of the bits and pieces in the engine bay so that we can make the space for these connections, snap them in, and that is it. Alright, so unfortunately in the era of lots of Amazon deliveries, the dogs are going so nuts that you cannot hear a word I am saying in this, so I'm going to voice over again. I'm talking about using my flathead once again to kind of pop these clips up. It helped me with that wire before, and now I'm just going to use that to pop the clips up. There are actually 3 clips that we're going to be working on. There's the one that I'm on right now. There's another one just to the right of where the hood latch actually is. There's that open cavity. And then there's one much closer to the camera at this moment. It's right around those pink caps. So those are the only 3 that you actually have to deal with in this particular assembly. So now that we have those clips out, we're actually going to be detaching that bottom section. It kind of looks like a little claw. And it is giving me a little bit of trouble here. It's always these little like unseen details that make a job a lot longer than the website says. So definitely plan to spend a while on this assembly if you want it done properly. Alright, so now that we have it apart, we're actually going to be putting that bottom claw-like section back in, and this metal spacer is actually going to replace the flat part on top because we need that spacer to keep the pink metal from sitting directly on top of your plastic there. So I'm going to take that little claw thing, stick it right back in there. It does take a couple seconds sometimes, they just don't really want to bend that way without the topper. And then once that's done, just like I said, take the metal parts and snap those in just like you would the regular flat piece. Alright, so like always, there's those unforeseen problems. My radiator shroud was actually a little bit bent. It did not totally line up perfectly with that left side spacer. And the problem with that is if you don't create enough pressure between them, it will not actually screw in and it'll literally just keep spinning, but it's not going to create enough tension. So I'm using washers to kind of increase the height of the spacer essentially and like add more spacers so that there's enough tension in there that hopefully the bolt will actually properly tighten into those spacers. Alright, so I put the washers on the other side. I'm just gonna like loosely test how it lines up with these. Oh my god, that's great. Yeah, I never claimed to be a professional, so. Alright, I sped this part up just a little bit because you don't necessarily need to sit here watching me screw it in the whole time, but I am essentially very gently screwing in the nuts and all that, just to kind of make sure that everything's lining up properly. Now that we made a little bit of an adjustment with those washers, I want to make sure that everything else is lined up perfectly and see if it actually helped kind of realign everything properly this time. And it seems like it's pretty secure now. Yeah, that's literally, like, that is exactly why I wanted to tape on that bolt before, because I knew something like that was going to happen with me. It just always does. So I'm glad it fell there, because I just easily reached right in the grill area and grabbed that. It's a little loose, which I don't love. I might come back to that, because I also realized the snap to change the air filters is under this now. So I'm going to have to take this off later in the year anyway, so maybe by then I'll see other people have done this and maybe they have tricks or something. Alright, that is it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you maybe enjoyed it, maybe learned some useful tips, maybe from my mistakes. Make sure to follow, like, subscribe, all those good things. We are 845 Subie. We are all over every social media you can think of, for the most part. I am Subie.Girl22, and we've got a lot of good things coming this summer, so make sure to stay tuned.